They say Niagara Falls is one of the most beautiful wonders of the world, but few realize it is also the resting place for more than 5,000 of the most extraordinary deaths in human history. Amid the thunder of water and the mist that never clears, there are stories few dare to tell. Stories of those who came here in their final moments, some seeking fame, some searching for freedom, and others seeking release. Some were swept away after a single misstep. Others made the fateful choice to leap into the abyss. Whatever their reasons, all left behind one haunting truth: the fragile line between life and its end. These are the most haunting and painful deaths in the history of Niagara Falls, where courage, madness, and despair are separated by only one fall. Number 1. James Honeycutt. To truly understand that fragile boundary, we have to start with one of the most astonishing stories of both life and death. It was July 9th, 1960, an afternoon drenched in summer sunlight over Niagara Falls. The water was calm, the breeze was gentle, and no one could have imagined that within minutes, this peaceful place would become the stage for one of the most famous survival stories ever told. James Honeycutt, 40 years old, was a construction manager working near the falls. That day, he invited 2 children, 7-year-old Roger Woodward and his 17-year-old sister Deanne, for a short sightseeing trip on a small aluminum boat about 13 feet long, powered by a modest 7.5 horsepower motor. Before leaving, Roger and Deanne's parents made sure the kids wore life jackets, a decision that would later save their lives. It was supposed to be a calm, joyful ride. The 3 set off, the children's laughter blending with the gentle murmur of the river. But less than a mile from the brink, the motor suddenly went silent. James leaned over to check, and the propeller pin had snapped. Now, the tiny boat was just a toy in a giant stream, one that poured more than 700,000 gallons of water every second. Honeycutt tried desperately to paddle toward the shore, but the current was far too strong. In the final, violent waves before the falls, the boat capsized, throwing all 3 into the raging water. As the current grew fierce, James had time for only one act. He grabbed Roger tightly and pushed Deanne toward the shore. Just moments before she would have been pulled over the edge, 2 tourists, John Hayes and John Quattrochi, climbed over the railing and managed to pull her to safety. But James and Roger were carried away, swept toward the Horseshoe Falls, a 160-foot plunge to the rocks below. Witnesses said that right before they vanished, James pushed Roger out of his arms, a final act of hope to save the boy. A brief moment, but one that changed history. Roger Woodward, weighing only 55 pounds and wearing a bright orange life jacket, landed miraculously in a rising cushion of water, a water cone that softened the impact. Moments later, he was spotted and rescued by the crew of the Maid of the Mist tour boat, with only minor injuries. Roger became the first person ever recorded to survive a plunge over Niagara Falls without any protective device. James, the man who saved him, never returned. His body was found 3 days later, half a mile downstream. Today, near Terrapin Point, a small plaque still tells their story, a reminder of nature's power and of how human courage can shine even at the edge of oblivion. Number 2. Charles Stephen. The story begins in the summer of 1920. Charles Stevens, a 58-year-old barber from Bristol, stood before the Horseshoe Falls with a plan that would shock the entire world. He would become the first person ever to go over the falls in a barrel. But this was no ordinary barrel. Stevens built it himself from oak and steel, breaking every safety rule of the time. His idea was strange but deliberate. He tied a 400-pound anvil to the bottom of the barrel, believing the extra weight would keep it upright during the drop. Like a pendulum staying in rhythm, "I will either succeed or I will die." Witnesses recalled him shouting before his assistants sealed the barrel shut. Without hesitation, they pushed it into the current. At first, everything seemed to go as planned. The barrel drifted toward the brink, rocking gently. Then came the moment of truth. As it fell 167 feet, the anvil meant to bring stability became its doom. The immense weight pulled the barrel downward with brutal speed, smashing it against hidden rocks beneath the surface. The sound of splintering wood echoed louder than the roar of the falls. 20 minutes later, the first fragments surfaced below. Then rescuers found something else, a broken piece of the barrel with an arm still attached. The tattoo reading, "Charles Stevens, the brave barber of Bristol." The rest of him was never recovered. Stevens became the first person to lose his life attempting to conquer Niagara Falls. His end was not just a personal tragedy. It was a warning that nature does not forgive arrogance. Yet strangely, the tragedy did not stop others. It ignited a new decade of reckless dreams. And 10 years later, another man would step into history with a barrel even stranger than Stevens's. Number 3. George Stathakis. The next story takes place in the summer of 1930, when the July sun glowed across the surface of the Niagara River. George Stathakis, a 46-year-old Greek man with dream-filled eyes, stood before the mighty falls, convinced that he was about to make history. George was not a blind thrill-seeker. He was a self-taught philosopher who believed that if he could survive the plunge of Niagara, he could share his reflections on life and death with the world. But to be heard, he needed a miracle. Where Stevens failed because his barrel was too weak, George went the opposite way. He would challenge nature with steel, oak, and faith. For months, he built a massive oak barrel reinforced with steel, weighing nearly 2,000 pounds and over 10 feet long, designed to withstand anything. He was so confident that he even brought a small oxygen tank and his 150-year-old pet turtle, Sonny Boy, as a symbol of luck and endurance. That morning, as the lid was sealed, the thunder of the falls echoed like a challenge. The wooden structure creaked under pressure as it drifted into the current. The crowd held its breath. Then the barrel disappeared behind the white curtain of water, swallowed by mist and noise. Miraculously, it survived the 167-foot drop. But this time, pride became a prison. The barrel was too heavy. It did not float downstream but got trapped in the violent whirlpool behind the falls. Inside his iron fortress, George faced a cruel reality. His air supply, designed to last 8 hours, was running out. The deafening roar drowned out every hope of rescue. For more than 22 hours, the barrel remained trapped before finally being released. By then, George was gone. The very structure built to protect him had become his final resting place. But there was one small miracle. Sonny Boy, the little turtle, survived unharmed, an almost poetic symbol of resilience and the fragile balance between dreams and fate. Today, George's barrel is still on display at Niagara, not as a symbol of victory, but as a timeless reminder of the thin line between ambition and reality, between dreams and tragedy. George Stathakis sought immortality but found peace instead. And his story leaves us with a haunting question. Where does human ambition stop? At Niagara, it seems no one ever does. Whenever one dreamer falls, another rises, believing they will be the exception. Number 4. William Red Hill Jr. The following story comes just 2 decades later. This is the tragedy of William Red Hill Jr., the son of Niagara's legendary rescuer. Red Hill Jr. grew up under the shadow of his father, William Red Hill, Sr., the hero credited with saving 28 lives from the deadly currents of the Niagara River. His father's fame was both pride and burden. By 1951, Red Jr.'s life had unraveled, unemployed, deep in debt, and desperate to restore the family name. In a moment of despair, he made a fateful decision to perform a stunt so daring the world would never forget the name Hill. On August 5, 1951, before a gathered crowd, Red Hill Jr. challenged the falls with a homemade contraption he called the Thing. It was a strange machine made of 13 heavy inner tubes bound tightly together with thick canvas straps, all wrapped in a large fishing net. He painted it silver and wrote its name boldly across the side. Despite repeated warnings from friends and experts that survival was almost impossible, Hill Jr. climbed inside. As the current carried the Thing toward the edge, the water began to spin violently. The moment it went over the Horseshoe Falls, the device shattered instantly into pieces. Red Hill Jr. had no chance. When rescuers found him later, his body was still strapped inside what remained of his invention, broken by the very thing he believed would protect him. His death marked more than the end of a man. It ended an era. The Hill family's legacy on the Niagara River, once filled with heroism and hope, was now silenced by tragedy. In response, Canada and the United States immediately banned all stunts or attempts to go over the falls, with fines of up to $25,000, officially ending a half-century of reckless daring. The loss of William Red Hill Jr. closed the chapter on Niagara's daredevil age. It was a tragedy, but one that made the falls just a little safer for those who came after him. Number 5. Jesse Sharp. This story also unfolded in the summer. Jesse Sharp, a 28-year-old kayaker from Tennessee, came to Niagara not to admire the view, but to search for immortality. Jesse possessed unmatched skill. He had conquered some of the most dangerous rapids in North America, and believed that the river was not a force to be feared, but one to be mastered. He planned his Niagara descent 3 years in advance. With a 3-person crew filming from the riverbank, Jesse set out to capture his journey into the dark, roaring waters. His goal was to boost his career as a stunt performer. Jesse refused to wear a helmet or a life jacket for 2 reasons. He didn't want to hide his face on camera, and he believed the gear might slow him down if he had to escape from beneath the falls. The night before his attempt, he even booked a dinner reservation to celebrate afterward. He was certain he would need it. On June 5, 1990, Jesse paddled straight toward the thundering waters. His friends cheered from the bank as the roar of Niagara grew louder. Within seconds, his bright red kayak vanished into the white mist. Jesse was never seen again. There was no trace, no debris, no body. Niagara had swallowed him whole. Days later, his kayak was found wedged between rocks and moss. Jesse himself became one with the river he believed he could conquer. There was a profound difference between Jesse Sharp and those who came before him. He didn't seek fame for its own sake, but rather, complete harmony with nature. He believed skill could replace safety, that talent could overcome fate. But Niagara delivers a brutal lesson. Before the raw power of nature, all are equal. The greatest skill and the deepest courage are still just grains of sand before a tidal force. Jesse Sharp did not fail because he lacked ability. His journey ended because he trusted his skill too much, and perhaps, in that final moment when his kayak plunged into the abyss, he understood the painful truth. Sometimes the bravest act is not to push forward, but to know when to stop. Number 6. Robert Overacker. The next story is a tragedy shaped by compassion and a fatal mistake. Even with stricter regulations in place, the desire to challenge Niagara remained stronger than the law itself. In 1995, Robert Overacker, a 39-year-old stuntman, came to the falls with a very different motivation. He wanted to raise awareness about homelessness. He once told his friends, "If I have to face death, let it be for saving lives." On October 1st, 1995, Robert prepared for a spectacular stunt. He would ride a jet ski straight toward the Horseshoe Falls. The plan was to activate a rocket-propelled parachute at the edge and glide safely down to the river below. Robert launched himself into the river from the Canadian power plant area. As he neared the brink, he triggered the rocket. The parachute deployed as planned, but tragedy struck when it slipped from his grasp and drifted away. What made Robert's story even more heartbreaking was the cause of his death. He hadn't packed the parachute himself. After 7 years of planning, he entrusted his life to equipment he never personally checked. Before the horrified eyes of his half-brother and a close friend, Robert Overacker fell freely into the roaring water below and met his fate within seconds. His body was recovered 20 minutes later, just a few hundred yards downstream. Across his chest were the words scrawled in marker, "Save the homeless." He became the 15th person ever to attempt Niagara's deadly challenge. Robert left this world trying to help others, yet he became the victim of his own good intentions. He didn't fail because of recklessness, but because of misplaced faith. In his preparation, in his equipment, and in his cause, and in his quest for immortality, he overlooked a simple truth. Sometimes one life is worth just as much as the thousands we wish to save. Number 7. Hessam Sai. This next story takes us into a courtroom, where the line between accident and crime becomes hauntingly thin. In 1981, a Lebanese immigrant family living in Toronto, Dunya and Rafik Sayeg and their 3 children, spent a warm summer day visiting the Canadian side of Niagara Falls. What began as a joyful family outing turned into a chilling tragedy that divided public opinion. Dunya held her 2-month-old son, Hesham, as they stood near the stone railing overlooking the Horseshoe Falls. The baby, who had a minor respiratory issue, was the center of her world. But while her husband went to buy film for their camera, Dunya suddenly staggered. She clutched her head, crying out that she felt dizzy, a symptom of her anxiety disorder. In that moment of terrifying disorientation, Hesham slipped from her arms and fell over the railing. Tourists screamed in horror as the baby was swept away by the powerful current. Within seconds, the infant vanished into the 160-foot drop below. Dunya collapsed, trying to leap after her son, but was restrained. Search teams scoured the river for days, but Hesham's body was never recovered. Initially, police ruled it a tragic accident. Witnesses confirmed Dunya's dizziness and her hysterical reaction after the fall. But within days, the investigation took an unexpected turn. After testing with a 12-pound dummy, police declared it was impossible for the baby to fall that way on its own. Dunya was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, a crime that carried a potential life sentence. The case became a national controversy. Dunya's defense portrayed her as a loving mother, tormented by anxiety, not a murderer. Friends testified about her devotion to Hesham and her obsessive fear for his health, which had led doctors to prescribe medication. Eventually, the judge dismissed the charge due to insufficient evidence of intent. Dunya Sayeg was legally acquitted, yet she left the courtroom a changed woman. The pain remained. Hisham's body was never found. Once again, Niagara didn't just swallow a human life. It consumed faith, hope, and justice itself. Even tears seemed to vanish into its current, leaving behind a haunting question. Perhaps Niagara is not merely a waterfall, but a mirror reflecting the deepest tragedies of the human heart. Number 8. Ayano Tokumasu. This story brings us into the modern era, a haunting tragedy perfectly suited to the 21st century, a life lost for the sake of a photograph. In 2011, Ayano Tokumasu, a 20-year-old Japanese student visiting Canada, became the face of this modern danger. Like millions of tourists before her, she was mesmerized by the beauty of the falls, but she wanted a photo that stood out, a perfect selfie at the edge of the abyss. One August afternoon, Ayano climbed over the safety railing at the Horseshoe Falls to stand on the forbidden ledge. She straddled the railing, posing for a shot that would capture both her and the roaring water behind her. But as she tried to climb back, a gust of wind swept her purse from her shoulder. Instinctively, she reached for it. That single motion, one misstep on the slick rock, sent her tumbling into the rushing current below. It happened in seconds. The river, carrying 750,000 gallons of water every second, pulled her swiftly toward the 80-foot drop. Nearby tourists screamed and reached out, but there was nothing anyone could do. Ayano Tokumasu was swept over the falls and lost her life. Rescue teams were alerted immediately. Helicopters and boats combed the waters in a desperate 4-day search. But the current was too strong. On August 18th, a park worker at the Cave of the Winds on the American side spotted a body floating downstream. Authorities confirmed it was Ayano. The tragedy grew even more haunting when her final moments were discovered unintentionally. A couple, Andrea Smith and Jason Watson, had been taking pictures at the same spot. Later, while reviewing their photos, they noticed Ayano in the background, wearing her bright red jacket, just minutes before she fell. Andrea later told the Windsor Star, "It sent chills down my spine. We could have done something, but we didn't." What was meant to be a joyful souvenir became a photo that captured a tragedy. Authorities at Niagara have long maintained strict safety barriers and warning signs. Yet Ayano's story remains a stark reminder that no photo, no thrill, is worth risking one's life. At a place of such overwhelming power, the line between a memorable shot and a fatal mistake can be as thin as a single misplaced step. From the first wooden barrels to the final selfie, Niagara has witnessed every shape of human ambition. It has been a scene of love and sacrifice, like when James Honeycutt gave his life to save young Roger Woodward, but it has also been a stage for madness, a place where people push their limits just to be seen or remembered, even for a moment. After more than a century, the falls remain unchanged. The water still thunders down every second, more than 700,000 gallons per minute, echoing through the wind with the same cold majesty it always had. Only humanity has changed. From dream-chasing adventurers to modern tourists obsessed with capturing the perfect image, over 5,000 lives have been claimed by Niagara. And no matter how hard authorities try, the falls remain a chilling reminder of the razor-thin line between bravery and recklessness. Yet one truth endures: Niagara itself does not harm people. It is human choices, born of daring, despair, or a moment's carelessness, that bring them to their end. Today, millions still visit each year, standing before the roaring water, raising their cameras to capture memories, unaware that beneath their feet, the river continues to carry unfinished dreams, swallowed prayers, and souls that never returned. If you were moved by James Honeycutt's sacrifice or haunted by Jesse Sharp's disappearance, share your thoughts in the comments. Which story do you find the most chilling? Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue exploring more real,